Welcome back to the workshop, everybody. It's time to tackle the footboard for the crib. If you haven't watched part 1 of the crib series, click here to watch that first. Let's get started. First, we have to make the basic frame for it. I started by marking and cutting the tenons for the crossbars. Then I pared them down with the chisel to make them extra pretty. After that, I traced the tenons onto the posts, hogged them out with a Forstner bit, and finished them off with the chisel. I did a lot of experimentation with the top bar. I wanted a curve in it, so there were multiple iterations of trying to steam bend the curve. Pine isn't a very good wood to steam bend, and it kept springing back, so I eventually made a giant compass out of some scrap wood, did some advanced math on Google, traced it, and cut it out on my bandsaw. I cleaned up the bandsaw marks with my orbital sander. The curve was oversized, so I attached the 2 posts and the bottom rail, made sure it was square, and then cut the curve down to size. A couple more mortars and tenons and the frame was complete. I chopped a mortise for the center rail and inserted it. Then I used a couple of spacer blocks I made to mark out the distance for the slats and the gap between them. Then I ripped all the slats to the size I needed. Now for the hard part. It's time to chop more mortises than any single project deserves. In the end, it really wasn't that bad. It took me about an hour to do them for the bottom and top rail, but man, did it feel like a lot of work at the beginning. To transfer the mortises from the bottom to the top rail, I clamped the 2 pieces right next to each other. Then, using a speed square, I transferred the lines vertically. I then used a combination square to set the width for the mortises, and after that, I used my speed square to transfer the vertical lines to the face I need to cut the mortises. Just 11 more mortises and the hard part is over. I lied. This glue up was a nightmare. Going back, I would have made the mortises deeper, but I had already cut the slats to length. It took several attempts on the dry fit, but the good news was I eventually got it. The bad news was I had to do it again with glue. But it all worked out and it was awesome to see it actually starting to come together. Now for the fun part. For the top rail, I got out the router and used an OG bit for the top of it and a cove bit for the bottom. Then I threw it into the steam box. The rule of thumb for steam bending is an hour per inch of thickness, but since pine is crappy for this, and it's a pretty significant bend, I left it in there for about 6 hours. I clamped it into a form, let it dry overnight, and then the next day I glued it to the footboard and left it in clamps for another night. I left the top rail long, so after it was glued I went back and cut it off at 90 degrees, and on each end added another flat piece with the same profile cut into it to finish it off. At this point, I realized the footboard was too short, so I added a couple extensions to the bottom and attached them with pocket screws. But fret not, I covered up the ghastly image of those pockets with some wonderful molding. One board I ripped with a 45-degree bevel to match the headboard, and then I added one more with an OG bit routed along the length, and a nice curved element that I cut out on the bandsaw. Just a little bit of smoothing on the belt sander and it was ready to attach. And with that, the footboard is complete. Thank you for watching. I've got links to my Instagram and the tools I used in the description below. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and tell your friends about this. It will really help me out. But don't tell them about the pocket screws. Seriously.